The goal for today's video is to run through some Lash Mapping 101. So by the end of this video, if you don't already know lots about mapping, you soon will. I'm Kaitlyn Elford. I'm the owner and lead educator here at Lost Artistry Lash. And today I really want to share all of my lash mapping tips with you. So these can be used for beginners, intermediate artists, and advanced artists. We're going to run through some of the most commonly used lash maps from cat eye, open eye, doll eye, squirrel eye. By the end of this video, you are going to know all about these lash maps and who they are suited for. First, let's chat about a cat eye set, because more often than not, clients will come in the door and they will say that they want a cat eye set of lashes. But the truth is that even though someone says they want a cat eye mapping, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to put our lengths on the outer corners and give them that standard cat eye map in order to make it look like a cat eye for them. So there's little tips and tricks that you can use in order to give them the style that they want without making their eyes look a little bit wonky, because that can for sure happen. So let me explain to you that. So here's our cat eye mapping. You can see that I've used lengths 8 all the way to 14 in this map. Now, for any mapping, these are just guidelines. Any mapping that I talk about today, it doesn't mean that you have to use these lengths. I'm not even going to talk about curls because that's a whole styling course, but we're going to go from lengths 8 all the way to 14. Some people may not have a lot of space between their lash line and their eyebrow. I actually have a ton of space, so you can do a little assessment on me right now and see that there's clearly a lot of room between my lash line and my eyebrow. So I have tons of space to fill in, whereas other people may not have a lot of space at all. So a cat eye, for me, may be that I would use longer lengths, all the way maybe up to 15. Actually, today I'm wearing 15 millimeters, but I'm using a squirrel eye mapping. So I'll get into that in a minute, but back on the note of the lengths. So if it says all the way to 14, if your client doesn't have the room to have a 14 millimeter length, you can absolutely decrease those lengths. You can go all the way down to an 8, 7, 6 if you want to, depending on what lengths you're going for. But we're using lots of lengths, and when you're working with a cat eye mapping, lots of lengths are necessary because you really want the transition from short lashes all the way into long lashes if you do use this mapping. That way it looks more dramatic. You can also mix curls as well, like a B curl on the inner corner, C curl in the middle, and a D curl on the outer corners. So who is a cat eye suited for? So a cat eye mapping is really only suited for a very small percentage of people. Those people whose outer corners are tilted upward. It's all about that eye plane. So if your client's eyes naturally pull upward and you did a cat eye, it would be lovely. But most clients' eyes don't sit that way. Most clients' eyes are shaped either like an almond or they're a little bit downturned on the end. And if we really go ahead and do our longest lengths on those outer corners, then instead of lifting the eye up, which is what we're intending to do with a cat eye, then instead we're drooping it down, and we can actually elongate that downward tilt on our eyes instead of lifting it up. So most often when someone asks for a cat eye, if they don't have upturned eyes or at least a straight across plane where their eyes sit at the exact same point on the inner corner and the outer corner, then we're going to use, instead of a cat eye, we're going to use a mapping known as a squirrel. That's what I have on my eyes today. So a squirrel mapping the longest lengths will be just in a little bit from the outer corners. So let's say your client has a regular almond shaped eye. Then in order to bring those outer corners up, we're going to use heavier curls. Like let's say we were using a C curl for most of our set. We'd want to maybe use a D curl on those outer corners to lift them up. And also we would use shorter lengths out there, because the longer lengths, the more heavier the lashes are, and the direction as well is really important. But we want everything to go up on those people who have a downward tilt on the outer corners, not out. So let's look at our squirrel mapping. So with our squirrel mapping, again, lengths can be changed. You can use less lengths, you can use more lengths, you can use longer or shorter lengths. But for this example, we went from our lengths all the way from 8 to 13 and then dropped back down to 12 on those outer corners. So you have to use your discretion. Where does this particular client need the most lift? And direction comes into play too. So for me, I needed my squirrel mapping, my emphasis area, to hit at about the point that my eyebrow peaks. So So that's what my lash artist did, but there's a trick to it. So if everything goes up and you use a very small section, then you're not going to get that cat eye appearance that you're wanting for your client. So instead what you're gonna do is in that squirrel section, in that 13 millimeter section in this mapping, you're gonna also direct out, only for that section. So you're directing out so that those longer lengths sit higher. Instead of lower, they're sitting higher. So you're directing out, and what you're actually doing is covering the outer corners, which are your shorter lengths that are already pointing up, because you're gonna direct those ones upward. You're kind of covering those with your longer lengths. I hope that I'm giving you a good enough visual and that I'm not over here like, what is this girl talking about? But so basically with that direction, we're gonna elongate the area that's gonna give lift. And to most people, they're gonna say, wow, this is an amazing cat eye, I love it. And they don't have any clue what lengths you put on where. So more often than not, unless your client has that upturned eye, then you're gonna use a squirrel eye mapping, also known as a kitten mapping, depending on who says it. I've just learned it as squirrel, so there's really no right or wrong when it comes to the name of this mapping. But more often than not, you're gonna use that when someone asks for a cat eye. Okay, so just a quick note. So remember I talked about before that plane, how it's lifted up? So this one here is a good example of a pretty even plane. So we could do a cat eye here because I'm not worried about the lengths drooping down. But now look at, I'll show you another one too. So this would be an example of an upturned eye. So the plane of the eye is tilting upwards. So we pretend that our pupil's around here. But it's tilted upward. Now this is known as our almond shape. So when you have an almond shape, you can see that the eye curves quite a bit downward on the ends. So imagine this, if I did my longest lengths here and directed out, I'm drooping the eye down. Now, if I didn't do that, and instead I did direction upward for the outer corners, and then direction outward for that emphasis area, for the squirrel map, then I am actually giving a squirrel-like effect without drooping the eyes down. So on that note, when we have someone who has a round eye, we're gonna call this a round eye here. Because their eyes are so short in width, you really do want to elongate the eyes. So this kind of client, you really wanna work with either a squirrel or a cat eye. Again, just depending on the plane that they have. If their eyes are pretty lifted and you can go ahead with your longest lengths on the outer corners, awesome. If not, squirrel mapping is totally fine. But if they have really round eyes, we do want to give the appearance that they are elongated a little bit more because they're already so open and surprised looking. So if we did, let's say, a doll map eye or an open eye, then we would actually open those up to make them look more surprised instead of elongating and making them look a little more sleek, which is what we go for when we're working with round eyes. So now let's go into who is suited for an open eye mapping. So check out our map that we have here. This is our open eye map. And again, we went from lengths all the way from 8 to 13 millimeter. And one note on the open eye map is you can really see that the 13 millimeter section is quite large. So your emphasis area is always going to be your largest section. So we have our 13 millimeters in the middle, and that's where we're going to really draw the eye open. So if you can visualize that, this client here with longer eyes, with a more narrow set eye, but much longer, we want to lift those eyes open, the exact opposite of our round eye. So we're trying to mix the two together to give them a more almond shape. So when we have our longer eyes, by putting our longest lengths in the middle, what we're gonna do is open the appearance of that eye up. And by putting our shorter lengths on the outer corners, we're not making that eye look any longer than it already is. So that's the goal there. And then again, with our upturned eyes, we can go for that cat eye because it's so beautiful. You can really do anything on this client, to be honest, and it'll look amazing because they have a super ideal eye shape, but they're really hard to come by. You're not gonna see these clients very often. And then another person who's going to be really suited for that open eye mapping is your client who comes in and has eyes that are really far apart. So these are considered our wide set eyes. So how we classify someone as the person with wide set eyes is just if you can take the width of this eye and put it right in between, if you can fit that eye plus some in between the middle of the eyes, then that's considered wide set eyes. So we want to make these eyes look like they're a little closer together. So how we're going to do that is actually make the eyes look bigger. We don't want to elongate the ends because it's going to look like it extends further. Instead, we're going to use shorter lengths, and we're going to do either a doll eye. Show you the map here. So this is our doll eye. So we're going to either use a doll eye, and doll eye doesn't have to be just like this. This is on an almond eye, so we did our 13 from about just before the middle of the eye to just before the ends of the eyes, but you can also take that doll eye and make it larger. So you can go 13 from here to here, here to here, and then quickly, or any other length of course, and then quickly drop your lengths down. And you can go that way as well. Again, doll eye, open eye, very, very similar mapping. So you can use either doll eye or open eye on a client who does have wide set eyes. One thing to note though, be careful with direction. You don't want to direct out because when we direct out, we're going to elongate. We want to direct everything up, not out. Because out's just going to make their eyes look a little bit longer. So we're directing everything up for that. And whether it's doll eye or open eye, doesn't matter. Both will look amazing. It just depends on what your client wants. And next, let's talk about our doll eye a little bit. Doll eye is awesome, and it's really nice for those clients who want lots of drama, especially if you have a younger clientele. I find that my younger clientele really want, no matter what, they want drama. Not all, but some. And doll eye is definitely universally known as that map that is perfect for those people who want all the drama. And then last one we have here is our close set eyes. So our close set eyes, we're trying to actually pull them apart. So you don't want to put too much emphasis on those inner corners because we don't want to make them look like they're getting pulled closer together. So I strongly suggest using very short lengths. I usually use lengths all the way down to 5 or 6 on those inner corners. And but you want to still get the inner corners. You want to do a really smooth transition. So we're going to go shorter lengths on those inner corners. And if the person is a good candidate for cat eye, awesome. We're going to pull those eyes out, pull them, give the illusion that they sit further apart or are longer. And then if they're not a good candidate for the cat eye map, then we're just going to use squirrel, and that will look lovely too. But shorter lengths are definitely ideal on the inner corners because we don't want to pull more attention to the inner corners and draw more attention to that area because it's just going to make the eyes look like they are closer together. And before I go, I'm just going to run through one more eye shape that I find I run into quite often that is definitely worth talking about. So a lot of people get nervous when they see someone come in with downturned eyes. So let's just look at our downturned eyes here for a second. They go on a very dramatic tilt. And we really want to lift that outer part of the eye up. So again, we're just working on really lifting everything up. Direction is up, up, up. And then you're gonna wanna maybe work with pretty dramatic curls on those outer corners to lift everything up. But again, make sure that you drop your lengths down pretty tremendously on the outer corners and yeah, just lift everything up. Wherever the eye starts to tilt downward, that's where your lengths and your curl are going to start moving upward. So you're gonna use more dramatic curl and longer lengths. So if you enjoyed this video and you have any suggestions on videos to come, or you have anything that you just really wanna learn about or chat about, please leave it in the comments below. And honestly, the more you guys comment, the more videos we make. So leave some comments, show us some love, give us a follow, subscribe, all that stuff. And one last thing, we do have tons of exclusive mappings on our Instagram. So if you don't follow us on there, it's @LostArtistryLash.